feel like I'm the black sheep. I'm just going to come in from an entirely different space. Thanks for having me. I am here. I am a Christian person. I'm an evangelical person. I believe in the authority of Scripture and salvation by grace, the necessity of having a personal faith. I'm not here as a theologian. I'm here as someone who spends a lot of time reading feminist and queer theory. I've just spent most of my year looking at the interaction of Protestant evangelical teaching on marriage with cultural marriage narratives and stories about happiness. I feel a bit strange being on this panel because there's actually so much that I'm unsure of. And academically, I'm quite critical of the way we speak about marriage. And by we, I guess I mean both my church culture, but also the wider circle of Western culture that I move in. So what I'm going to talk about is what I see as that problem of privileging marriage as the ideal way to be, and the way that we do that by connecting ideas of marriage, happiness, and salvation. And this can make it seem like being married is necessary in order for us to be happy, maybe even necessary for us to be proper Christians, which completely ignores the fact that there are many times in the Bible where being unmarried is upheld. Significantly in 1 Corinthians 7, Paul teaches us that while it's okay to be married, it might actually be better not to be. So my thinking in this space is hugely influenced by a feminist theorist called Sara Ahmed, who in 2010 wrote a book called The Promise of Happiness. And she teaches us that when we attach this idea of future happiness to particular life choices, like getting married or having a baby, we create a happiness script that can work to regulate our behaviour. Because basically, we all think, I want to be happy. Therefore, if the world tells us to do something in order to be happy, like get married, it's the happiest day of your life, we think, yeah, I want to be happy, I want to be married. So what does this mean for us as we think about marriage and evangelical Christianity? As a good Anglican, I'm going to talk about this by asking three questions. What is the marriage narrative? How does happiness regulate behaviour? And why is there a problem with happiness via marriage script? So what is the marriage narrative? It's a really common cultural plot that you might have come across in a fairy tale, or if you read Jane Austen, you might call it a Cinderella narrative. And it teaches us that good girls, usually girls, good girls are rewarded with marriage, and that marriage in turn is the start of a new and happy life. We learn to long for marriage because our painful childhoods or our adult loneliness will be redeemed through the arrival of a prince. It's always a prince, it's never a princess. Domestic bliss and the promise of happily ever after. This promise of happily ever after makes it a really compelling story. And we think, you know what? I want that in my life because I want to be happy. How does it regulate behaviour and desire? When we promise happiness, that says that some lives, mainly married lives, are better and happier than other lives. And that other lives, sexually other lives, whether you're unmarried or non-monogamous, or asexual, or celibate, or in a queer relationship, are by implication unhappy. That's kind of a problem. Additionally, in Christian culture, being happy, particularly being happily married, can be read as a blessing from God or an answer to prayer. People say, I've always longed for this person, and God has so blessed me with sending me, my future partner. I think that makes being an unhappy Christian kind of problematic. It's a little bit like, I guess, an emotional prosperity gospel. If you're unhappy, if you're unmarried, did you pray hard enough? And that worries me. When you put that together, I think what you get is a really compelling happiness via marriage script, Why is that a problem? It's a problem because it takes us away from the gospel, but it's also a problem because it creates a template for how to live, which invalidates other forms of living life. In Christian culture, because we connect a lot of theological significance to to marriage and to weddings, it's possible that we can have this kind of conceptual slide between promising happiness and promising salvation, whereby promising one, it kind of sounds like we're promising the other one. So I think we need to be very careful about how we talk about marriage. And although I do support changing the law, I'm very hesitant to talk about marriage as being necessary in order for people to be happy, or in order for people to be healthy, or even in order for them to be a good Christian. So what? Why does any of that matter? For me, it matters because how we vote isn't the end of the story. And how you vote, regardless of whether you voted yes or no, or left your form on the table, it doesn't tell us what to do as a church. I think that we need to make space in which we can be more proactive and creative in thinking about how we talk about marriage, happiness, belonging, and inclusion. Because there are always going to be people in our communities who don't fit our relational ideals, whatever those ideals are. There are going to be people who are widowed. There are going to be people who never marry anybody. There'll be queer Christians. Some of them will be in relationships. Some of them will be committed to living celibate lives. There'll be unmarried straight Christians, some of whom are sexually active, others of whom have committed to celibate lives. And I would like a community that actually has space for all of us, wherever we are in that range of possibility, regardless of whether we're straight or queer, married or unmarried. I would like a community where we help each other to be committed to living lives that are full and rich, where we help each other to love and serve God as his people, regardless of our sexuality or our marital status. Thanks.
I'm really happy that we opened earlier on with an act of worship when we passed the peace, because I actually need to open with a confession, which is also an act of worship. And this morning I picked up my